It's no surprise to note that car design has changed over the decades, reflecting the trends and customer demands of their time. From horseless carriages to the muscle car to the minivan to today's ubiquitous SUVs in shades of white, black, and gray, the history of the automobile can divide it up into 7 distinct eras. Each of these reflect their time, technology, and society as a whole. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. If you're new here, my name is John, and this is a far too brief history of the different eras of the automobile. The age of the auto is widely recognized to begin in 1885 with the Benz patent Motorwagen as the first practical and saleable vehicle for everyday use. Some early manufacturers, such as Benz or Oldsmobile, started as car companies, while others moved to autos from bicycle manufacturing, such as Winton, or from the carriage industry, such as Studebaker and Anderson. At the time, it was unknown what the ideal form and makeup of the auto would be, so this was a period of intense experimentation and nearly yearly development. Early carriages were three-wheeled, but then quickly added a fourth. A tiller set in the middle controlled steering before the steering wheel, while whether the driver should sit on the left, right, or middle was settled. Rear-engine, chain-driven powertrains were common, and those power plants varied wildly as well, from electric to steam, diesel, two-stroke, four-stroke, water-cooled, and air-cooled. One personal favorite was the air-cooled Old Porcupine engine of Knox, which dissipated heat not through fins, but 1,750 rods screwed into the block. While in the early 1900s, the final layout and propulsion had not been settled on, the template for the modern car was set in the 1890s by Panhard Levasseur from France. 4 wheels, steering wheel, clutch pedal, rear-wheel drive, front engine and radiator, and a transmission. By 1901, Oldsmobile had created the assembly line with interchangeable parts and dominated the industry for a time. The brass era is largely an American term defined by the use of brass for the lights, controls, and radiators. While earlier autos did use brass, by 1905 the system Panhard had been established and the earlier buggy designs began to give way to runabouts, tonneaus, and enclosed bodies. Popular in many makes, they were really defined by the more exclusive cars of the era, such as Packard, Pierce Arrow, Cadillac, and others. While the earlier era saw experimentation with a variety of power sources, with steam cars being among the fastest in the world, in 1908 the Ford Model T began to bring car ownership to the masses and solidified petrol power as the fuel source of choice, squeezing out electric and steam in the coming decades. With consolidation around both fuel source and layout, innovation expanded rapidly with major advancements such as independent suspension, the use of leaf springs, four-wheel brakes, electronic ignition, and the use of wood as a frame material being replaced with steel. While some innovations were new, many had been developed earlier and simply began to become more common at the time. The end of the era corresponds to the brass fittings falling out of style, but also the Model T stopped using most brass fitments, with World War I now raging in Europe. It's interesting to note that in 1917, there were at least 127 different makes of just American automobiles on the market. The vintage era is bookended by starting with the end of World War I and ending with the Great Depression. In 1919, 90% of cars sold were open, and by the end of the era, 90% were enclosed. This time continued to see rapid engineering advancements, with hydraulic brakes invented in 1919 and premiering on the Duesenberg Model A in 1921. Engine technology advanced rapidly with V8, V12, and V16 engines, and the introduction of multi-valve and overhead cams as well. A number of influential vehicles were introduced. The Austin 7 was successful in its own right and was used as a template for cars from BMW and Nissan. Lancia introduced the Lambda that used a monocoque or structural skin design, as well as an independent front suspension. Bugatti's Type 35 won 1,000 races in 5 years. The Hanomag 210 moved to pontoon styling, a trend that predicted the future but was years too early. In 1927, Ford stopped production of the Model T and introduced the more modern Model A, itself becoming the best-selling car of its time. Octane ratings were established in this period, as well as lead being added to fuel to increase its octane, beginning to allow engines in coming decades to increase both compression and power. The pre-war era began with the thinning and consolidation of auto manufacturers with the Depression through to the restart of auto production after World War II. Some of the biggest changes were with styling, as fenders, running boards, and headlights began to be incorporated into the body, and the newer sedan body style incorporating a trunk at the rear. Many technologies we'd find familiar today had been invented. Front-wheel drive was used by Cord and Alvis and made famous with Citroën's traction Avant in 1934. The V8 made its move from luxury vehicles to mainstream with Ford's Model B. Some manufacturers experimented with aerodynamics, such as Tatra with their 77 and the maligned but far ahead of its time Chrysler Airflow. This was the period where the Beetle was designed, breaking from the front-engine rear-wheel drive standard as typified by my honorable mention of the MGT series of affordable sporting cars. The Art Deco movement had a lasting impact on car styling that continued in elements until the 1950s, creating beautiful American cars such as the Cord L29 and later 810, the Airflow, Duesenbergs, and even the Checker Model A taxi, but also in Europe with the Tatra T87, the Talbot Lago T150C SS, the Scout Scarab, and many, many more. The post-war era is a long, varied, and loosely defined time with massive changes in the dominance of American brands and style, but also characterized by the slow rise in the U.S. of imports. After World War II in the U.S., there was pent-up demand and millions of servicemen with money to spend, but throughout much of the world, money and resources like steel were scarce. The first cars after World War II were largely lightly refreshed relaunches of pre-war cars, but by 1947 American brands were coming out with new designs that had moved to the elimination of running boards and further integration into the body. Studebaker led the way in 1947, as well as a new Kaiser Frazer and the Hudson Commodore, which moved the frame out and the passengers in and down, lowering the car and its center of gravity. Stylistically, GM led the way with chief designer Harley Earl creating the idea of the concept car with the Buick Model Y, clay modeling, and the 1948 Cadillac, setting the styling trend for the industry to follow for decades. By 1949, most of the industry had released new cars and the race was on. Through the 1950s, the driving styling directive was longer, lower, wider. The V8 became the standard, engine sizes ballooned, and power consistently increased. There was a new arms race for bigger cars with more chrome and ever larger fins. But around the world, smaller cars dominated. The VW Type 1 was exported globally, Fiat created the 500, and in the UK the iconic Mini was a hit, while in Japan K cars became popular. In the US, Nash had a hit with their long-running and compact Rambler model. In the 1960s, the rise of imports and small cars like the Rambler stirred GM to action, releasing the much-maligned Corvair lineup. Safety slowly became increasingly important to consumers, and then in 1964, Ford launched the Mustang, and the muscle car era was born. Competitors responded with cars such as the Camaro, while others such as the GTO, the Great One, the Barracuda, Firebird, AMC Javelin all took the recipe of a smaller, compact 2+2 platform with ever bigger engines. It was here a small trickle of cars from Japan began to be imported. The 70s started with the pony car wars winding down and the beginning of the malaise era. Leaded gasoline was banned, fuel economy standards were established, as well as emission restrictions and controls. With two gas crises in the decade, smaller fuel-efficient cars became demanded. While the American auto companies had a few offerings, such as the Dodge Omni, Chevy Chevette, or AMC's Gremlin and Pacer, buyers began flocking to imports from Japan. Nissan, Toyota, and Honda showed buyers that a small, front-wheel drive import that was well-built and incredibly efficient was exactly what they needed. U.S. brands responded with a concerted downsizing effort on many of their cars. This ushered in the imports era, lasting until roughly the Great Recession. At the start of the 80s, the American automobile companies were on the ropes. Chrysler was near bankruptcy and needed government-backed loans to survive. GM began to hemorrhage market share and responded by going on a spending spree with Roger Smith, while the Japanese car brand sales increased yearly, while sometimes working with domestic manufacturers who themselves struggled to design new front-wheel drive cars while improving build quality, with mixed success. European brands such as Fiat and Renault gave up and left the U.S. market entirely. The 80s were dominated by three distinct moments. In 1984, after successfully releasing the K cars, Chrysler shocked the market with the minivan and inspired competitors from most major brands. Sales of station wagons continued, but were overshadowed by the success of the minivan. In 1986, Ford released the Taurus to great success, becoming the best-selling car in the country for several years before losing the title to the Accord and then the Camry. Voluntary import restrictions on the Japanese brands, an effort to protect the U.S. auto industry, backfired spectacularly when Honda and others built manufacturing in the U.S., as well as creating their own luxury brands in Acura, Infiniti, and Lexus to chase higher profits. Yugo was briefly successful but failed, but in 1985, Hyundai entered the U.S. market with the Excel. They continued to grow their model lineup, offering their 10 100,000-mile warranty to help explode sales, and they too eventually moved towards the luxury market. Through the 1990s and 2000s, truck sales expanded and the SUV came to dominate the parking lots, while increasing use of computerization improved fuel economy and emissions. In 1997, Toyota introduced the Prius, becoming the it car to have and setting off a move to hybridization that continues to this day. All was not rosy. Some brands like Oldsmobile were canceled. Sales at Pontiac and Mercury were suffering. Chrysler merged with Mercedes only to be gutted and sold off again. Some smaller Japanese brands like Isuzu and Suzuki decided to just leave the US market. In 2008, the financial crisis hit, cutting sales for many makes by around a third. Both GM and Chrysler declared bankruptcy, with Fiat rescuing Chrysler and GM getting rescued by the government. Saturn, Hummer, and Pontiac were all canceled. Saab collapsed, Ford sold Volvo to Geely, and much more consolidation occurred. In 2009, China became the world's largest car manufacturer, and in 2012, Tesla introduced their Model S after the success of their Roadster. While not the first EV company, they went on to become its most successful, eventually topping $1 trillion in valuation. Since the recession, trucks and SUVs have continued to dominate the market, and one ongoing criticism is the joyful colors of previous decades have given way to black, white, and gray. American brands have almost totally abandoned sedans, with a few exceptions like the Mustang. EV models have expanded, gaining market share across the world as they've become less expensive and available to the average consumer. A big push by Western governments to force EV adoption led to massive investment by automakers, only for mass market sales to lag and brands to lose tens of billions of dollars in the early 2020s. Consolidation continued, with FCA merging with PSA to form Stellantis. Nissan was having its own struggles and is now cutting costs in production and had considered merging with another company. What does the future hold? All we can be certain of is continuing change. Rising prices have automakers concerned about affordability. Slower than expected EV adoption in most markets has led to new investment in the next generation of ICE and hybrid powertrains. But clearly, the next era will be the age of China. Chinese brands continue to evolve at a rapid rate and to expand in the worldwide market. In early 2026, the historic brand MG, now owned by Chinese firm SAIC, became the first Chinese brand to surpass 1 million in sales in Europe and the UK. Western brands continue to partner with Chinese brands such as Audi with SAIC, Ford with Shangan, BMW with Great Wall Motor, not only for access to China, but also to build cars in China with Chinese technology and to bring them to their domestic markets, all while Chinese brands eye those markets under their own names. And the future is not far off. As I'm recording this, data shows that China exported 666,000 vehicles in a single month in late 2025, putting them on track to have exports of 8 million a year to over 100 countries. Consider that in 2020, they only exported 1 million. For those opposed to EVs, this doesn't protect your market. In 2024, 78% of their exports were internal combustion engine vehicles. Their EV sales get the headlines, with BYD surpassing Tesla for the global sales lead, but China is dominating in conventional cars as well. China also has right now over 100 companies and nearly double the capacity to build cars relative to demand. The coming era will see that field thinning out, but also further consolidation between Western, Asian, and Chinese brands beyond just joint ventures we see today. Much like Geely owns Volvo and Lotus, famous Western brands, it's not a stretch to see SAIC, Chery, GAC, Great Wall, Xiaomi, and others merging with Western brands as the controlling partner. The question is, will the makes like General Motors or Ford or Renault be open to it, or will they even have the power to resist it? A special thanks to my patrons who help make videos like this possible. If you like videos like this, please consider liking and subscribing, and be sure to check out my second channel, All Cars Reacts, where I do reactions, news opinions, and generally vlog about the automotive industry. And if you like this video, well, I bet you're going to love that one right there. Thank you so much for spending just a few minutes with me here today.